And I looked over like this, and I'm like, oh my God, here's his shape. Big shape, typical Bigfoot, head, shoulders, standing probably 1.5 feet above you.
They say Bigfoot prefers the dark, that the night shields its movements, but sometimes even the shadows can't keep it hidden. From unsettling encounters deep in the wilderness to moments caught entirely by chance, each sighting you're about to hear has left people asking the same question. How much longer can this creature remain a mystery? The Colorado Trail Encounter.
It's been said that Bigfoot exhibits nocturnal behavior, perhaps to hunt or to avoid detection. But the cloak of darkness couldn't hide the creature in the stunning footage you're about to see.
It started on a trail they knew by heart, a narrow mountain path winding through the forests of Colorado. For two couples hiking together on March 5th, 2025, it was meant to be just another familiar trek. But somewhere along that quiet stretch, the calm began to change. The air felt heavier, the kind of stillness that makes you slow your step without realizing it. Then came the sound. Heavy, deliberate footfalls ahead, not a casual stroll, not a deer darting through underbrush. This was fast, rhythmic, and powerful, each step landing with a weight that seemed to press into the earth. And then, another sound layered over it. A deep, strange mumble, low and patterned, as if something were speaking in a language no one recognized. Those who've claimed to encounter Bigfoot before often describe this same unsettling detail, a kind of low, deliberate chatter. Not random noise, but something with intent. The hikers barely had time to exchange glances before it appeared. A towering figure moved across the trail ahead, neither rushing nor ducking for cover. It simply walked, steady and unbothered, only a few yards away. One hiker, acting on instinct, raised their phone and snapped a single photograph. That image would stun anyone who saw it. Arms impossibly long, hanging far past the knees. A hunched frame that matched descriptions whispered for decades. And then, the face came into view. It was not covered in fur like the rest of its body, but bare-skinned, almost human, yet nothing human at all. Colorado's wilderness has long been fertile ground for these stories. Long before miners arrived during the gold rush of the 1800s, indigenous tribes like the Ute, Arapaho, and Cheyenne spoke of forest people who were powerful but elusive beings that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Later, miners would tell of piercing howls in the night and massive footprints found near their camps. Over time, certain places like Pike National Forest, the San Juan Mountains, the small town of Bailey became known for their strange, unexplained sightings. But this was different. This wasn't a fading campfire tale or a secondhand account. It was daylight. It was close. And this time, there was a photograph. The hidden video from 2023. Not long after the Colorado photo began circulating, another piece of evidence surfaced. This time it was moving footage. It had been captured 2 years earlier but kept hidden from the public until much later, known only to a select few. It began innocently enough. A lone hiker moving along a quiet dirt trail, the sort of path where every step sinks into soft soil and the only sound is the whisper of wind through the canopy. The forest was still, wrapped in a calm that almost felt protective, until it wasn't. Without warning, that stillness cracked. Something heavy, far heavier than any deer or bear, crashed through the brush behind him. Branches splintered. Leaves shook violently. The noise wasn't just loud, it carried weight, like the ground itself was reacting to each step. Instinct took over. He spun around, phone in hand, and hit record. The footage lasted only seconds, yet those seconds burned themselves into the memory of anyone who saw them. From between the trees emerged a massive figure, walking upright with an unsettling steadiness. It climbed the slope ahead, its strides impossibly long and powerful, covering ground as though gravity didn't apply in the same way. Even in those brief, shaky frames, the details stood out. Broad shoulders, a rounded head, a lean but powerful frame. Like the figure in Colorado, its face appeared lighter than the rest of its body, an unsettling contrast in the dim light. Some viewers who studied the footage frame by frame swore they saw something even more chilling, a faint, almost unnatural glow in its eyes as it glanced toward the camera. Was it a trick of light, or something else entirely? No one could say for certain. The man filming didn't stay to find out. Within moments, he turned and left the area, never sharing the exact location. Some believe he kept it secret to protect the creature's habitat. Others think he wanted to avoid the scrutiny and chaos that come with a sighting of this magnitude. Skeptics were quick to point out its height, estimated at 9 to 10 feet, as a reason for doubt. But height in Bigfoot reports has always been variable: 6 feet, 10, occasionally 12 or more. This one fits squarely within that range. Brief though it was, the video carried something most alleged encounters lack: movement. A rare, living glimpse that mirrored decades of testimony and made the mystery not only harder to dismiss, but harder to forget. The riverbank standoff. And then there was the encounter where silence became its own kind of language. A lone cameraman, trekking through a remote stretch of wilderness, found himself near a quiet, slow-moving river. On the far bank, partially framed by the trees, stood a dark, heavy-set figure impossible to ignore. It didn't sway or fidget. It didn't turn away. It simply stared. Its gaze seemed fixed directly on the lens, the kind of stare that bypasses the camera entirely and locks onto the person behind it. For a long moment, neither moved. It was a standoff without words, but one thick with unspoken tension. From behind the camera, the man's voice wavered. It wasn't full-blown panic, but there was a tremor, that involuntary edge that creeps in when your instincts scream that you're somewhere you shouldn't be. The setting only heightened the unease. The riverbank was secluded, hemmed in by dense forest and choked with overgrown vegetation. No trails, no footprints, no other human presence for miles in any direction. It was the kind of place where something could exist unseen for years, surfacing only when it chose to. For those who later viewed the footage, the combination was chilling: the size and mass of the figure, the deliberate stillness, and the primal reaction of the man filming. There was no blur of motion to analyze, no shaky retreat through the underbrush. Instead, the moment lingered in perfect clarity, a visual stalemate between observer and observed. To many, that was what made it one of the most convincing face-to-face encounters ever caught on camera. Not because the figure moved or acted aggressively, but because it stood there, unshaken, holding its ground as if it knew exactly what and who it was dealing with. The Shaver Lake discovery. Shaver Lake, California is a place better known for calm waters and fishing trips than for anything that might make your heart race. For one man, it began like any other outing. Rod in hand, eyes on the water, the day promised nothing more than a few quiet hours by the bay. But the shoreline told a different story. Pressed deep into the soft earth were footprints that were massive, well-defined, and far too large for any human. Each step sank with a weight that hinted at something powerful moving through the area, something that walked with purpose rather than chance. The impressions were fresh enough that damp soil still clung to the edges, making it clear whatever had passed through hadn't done so long ago. The man continued his day, unaware that the real surprise had already been caught, not in his memory, but in his camera. Only later, while scrolling through the photos from the trip, did he notice it. There, in the background, half veiled by the trees, stood a tall, shadowed figure. Its form blended with the forest, yet something about it drew the eye: the height, the solid build, the way it seemed to command the space around it. But one detail stood out above all. Pressed against its chest was something smaller, lighter in color. The positioning was unmistakable. You can tell just by the way primates cradle their young. The smaller shape seemed nestled securely, almost hidden, yet visible enough to suggest movement or life. The figure's proportions didn't align with anything human. A broader head, heavy shoulders, and a body that seemed built for raw strength. Even obscured by branches and shadow, its size was undeniable. If the image was real, it was more than just another blurry glimpse of a lone creature. It hinted at something far rarer, that these beings might not wander the wilderness in isolation, but live and move in family groups. the kind of detail researchers have speculated about for decades, yet have almost never seen documented. One photograph, one strange moment buried in a day of fishing, had quietly opened the door to an entirely new question. If Bigfoot has young, how many more could be out there, hidden among the trees, and how close might they already be? The Bailey, Colorado close-up. In 2022, a video began circulating online that many immediately labeled one of the clearest Bigfoot recordings ever captured. The clip was said to have been filmed near Bailey, a small Colorado town already known among enthusiasts as a hotspot for strange sightings. This was no distant shaky shot lost in a haze of trees. The figure in this footage was close enough for the camera to capture it in crisp, high definition. It stood partially concealed behind a tree, but not enough to obscure the details that would grip anyone watching. The fur was dark, thick, and uneven, catching light in a way that made it seem real rather than staged. Its face, though partly shadowed, appeared raw, almost primitive, a blend of human-like structure and something entirely other. And its build was unmistakable, tall, upright, with the kind of proportions that seemed more suited to power and endurance than to human form. Reactions online were split down the middle. Some swore the video was genuine, pointing to its steadiness and clarity as proof, a rarity in a world where most alleged sightings dissolve into blurs. They claimed the movements, the subtle shifts in posture, and the natural blending of the figure into its surroundings felt too fluid to be a costume. Others, however, dismissed it as digital manipulation, a clever fabrication aided by modern editing tools. To them, the very clarity of the video was suspicious. But whether believer or skeptic, one thing was undeniable. This was not the usual fleeting glimpse of a shadow disappearing into the tree line. This was close, steady, and startlingly detailed. For some, it was the strongest visual evidence yet. For others, it was just another mystery waiting to be picked apart, frame by frame. The trail camera mystery. Around the same time, the Bailey footage ignited debate. Another image emerged online, this one not captured by a person at all, but by an unmanned trail camera positioned deep in an isolated stretch of forest. These devices are designed to work silently, triggered only when movement occurs in front of them. Most of the time, they record deer, raccoons, or the occasional wandering bear. But this time, it caught something entirely different. The image, almost immediately hailed by enthusiasts as the clearest Bigfoot photograph to date, showed a towering figure standing upright between the trees. Every detail seemed to be there. The thick, coarse fur that caught stray light filtering through the canopy, the weight of its stance, the powerful build. It wasn't hunched like a bear, nor proportioned like a human in a suit. Its posture was loose, almost casual, as though it had been caught mid-thought rather than mid-stride, with the kind of stillness that suggests it didn't feel threatened at all. Even without anything beside it for scale, the size was evident. The broad shoulders and sheer height gave it a presence that would have dwarfed any person. You could almost imagine what it would feel like to stand in front of it, the unsettling knowledge that it could block out the light if it stepped closer. But then came the detail that split the community in two. Along one side of the figure, where fur met the backdrop of trees, the outline blurred, not the natural blur of motion, but something harder to explain. It was uneven, almost digital in texture. It distorted the edge, as if the boundary between creature and forest had been tampered with. For skeptics, this was the fatal flaw. They pointed to it as the telltale scar of digital manipulation, a sign that the image might have been layered or altered. In their minds, a photo this clear was suspicious from the start, and this blur sealed their doubts. Others, however, refused to dismiss it so easily. Trail cameras, they argued, are far from flawless. A sudden shaft of light, a smudge on the lens, or a quirk of focus could create odd visual artifacts. And unlike staged photographs, this one lacked any sign of careful posing. It looked spontaneous, almost accidental, as if whatever was in frame had no idea it was being recorded. Weeks later, the argument still hadn't died down. No one had proven the photo real. No one had proven it fake. It remained frozen in that strange middle ground, compelling enough to study, flawed enough to doubt. And in that limbo, it joined the long, stubborn list of Bigfoot evidence that refuses to close the case, stoking curiosity, provoking arguments, and keeping the legend alive for just a little longer. The Lick Fork Encounter. Not every encounter leaves behind a photograph or a grainy video clip. Some leave nothing tangible at all, just the echo of a sound, the imprint of a track, and the lingering question of what you've just experienced. In Virginia's remote Lick Fork area, a group of hikers set out on what they thought would be a quiet, uneventful day in the wilderness. The air was cool, the trail winding through thick undergrowth and towering pines. For a while, the only sounds were their footsteps and the rustle of leaves in the wind. Then it happened. A sound unlike anything they had ever heard before began to roll through the forest. It was a howl that was deep, resonant, and so drawn out it seemed to vibrate in their chests. It didn't rise and fall like a coyote's cry. It didn't carry the sharp edge of a wolf's call. This was heavier, slower. Each note felt deliberate, as if it were meant to travel far and announce itself to anything within range. They stopped to listen. The howls came again, each one distant yet powerful, the kind of sound that makes you instinctively check over your shoulder. Then, as they cautiously moved toward it, they found something even more startling: massive footprints pressed into the damp earth. The impressions were clear, spaced so far apart that no human could have made them. By their estimation, the creature that left them would have stood well over 7 feet tall and weighed hundreds of pounds. But the strangest moment was still to come. As they approached the area where the howls had been loudest, their phones began to act up. Screens froze, calls failed. Some batteries that were freshly charged drained rapidly, as if the energy was being pulled from them. This detail wasn't unique. In other alleged Bigfoot encounters, witnesses have reported similar electromagnetic interference, though no one has been able to explain why. When the hikers shared their account with the Rocky Mountain Sasquatch organization, investigators noted the unusual combination of evidence, the depth and spread of the tracks, the distinctive howl patterns, and the simultaneous failure of multiple electronic devices. There was no image to scrutinize, no film to dissect, but the encounter left a mark on everyone involved, a vivid memory, an unsolved question, and the sense that they had walked into something that wasn't meant to be seen. The Oregon Log Mystery. April 19, 2025, a date etched into the memory of one Oregon couple for reasons they still can't fully explain. The day began like so many others, with a walk along a trail they had hiked countless times before. The path was familiar, the air calm, the forest quiet, until they stumbled across something that stopped them cold. In the middle of the forest floor stood a massive log, planted vertically into the ground. It wasn't leaning. It wasn't resting against anything. It stood firmly upright, its base buried deep as if driven into the earth with tremendous force. The scene didn't add up. There were no broken stumps nearby to suggest it had simply fallen and lodged itself in place. No churned up soil, no snapped branches overhead. The surrounding forest canopy was untouched, undisturbed, as if the log had simply appeared there. It was an unsettling sight, made stranger by its sheer impossibility. A tree that size would be difficult for a team of people to lift and position upright, let alone anchor into hard-packed earth. And yet, there it was, standing alone like some kind of silent marker. Those familiar with Bigfoot accounts couldn't ignore the connection. Stories have long described the creature as possessing immense physical strength, strong enough to hurl rocks, twist thick branches, or carry logs. The placement of this trunk seemed almost deliberate, as if done with intention rather than accident. The woman filming the discovery was quick to rule out natural causes. In her follow-up video, she made it clear there had been no storms, no high winds, and certainly no tornadoes in the area. The log had not fallen from above. The unbroken canopy overhead made that impossible. Choosing caution over curiosity, she refused to reveal the exact location, saying she didn't want to risk disturbing wildlife or perhaps a possible Bigfoot habitat. The mystery of how the log came to be there remains unanswered, but for those who've heard the story, it lingers like a quiet challenge from the forest itself. Some things aren't meant to be explained. The roadside sighting in Michigan. The last encounter came from the winding backroads of Michigan, a state whose thick forests and endless tree lines have a way of hiding things in plain sight. A tourist had pulled over to capture a photo of the quiet, twisting road ahead, the kind of peaceful image meant for a travel album. The pavement curved gently out of sight, flanked by towering trees that blocked much of the sky. At first glance, the picture was nothing more than a serene roadside view. But later, while reviewing the images, something unexpected came into focus. On the far left edge of the frame, almost swallowed by shadow and foliage, stood a tall, dark figure. Its outline was just distinct enough to separate it from the tree trunks around it. It wasn't just the size that stood out, though that alone was striking. The figure's head was conical in shape, its shoulders broad and square, its arms and legs long and proportioned in a way that didn't match any human frame. The stance appeared caught mid-motion, as though the figure had been walking parallel to the road and had paused, if only for a heartbeat, before disappearing into the tree line. The natural, fluid positioning of its body made it harder to dismiss as a person in a suit. There was no awkward stiffness, no exaggerated posing, just a fleeting glimpse of something moving through the forest in a way that felt both casual and deliberate. Michigan's wilderness has long been part of the Bigfoot conversation, with sightings often peaking in the transitional seasons, spring and fall, when animals and, perhaps other beings are on the move. This photograph, whether evidence or coincidence, slid neatly into those long-standing patterns and became yet another thread in the state's tapestry of unexplained encounters. From the high mountain trails of Colorado to the hidden backroads of Michigan, the stories remain eerily consistent, with towering figures glimpsed for only moments, strange sounds that defy explanation, physical traces left behind in places where no one should be. Photographs spark debate, videos ignite arguments, footprints vanish under wind and rain. And still, the sightings continue, making themselves known in the landscapes that seem built to keep their secrets. Perhaps these creatures are nothing more than misidentifications and myths, stitched together by decades of campfire tales. Or perhaps they are exactly what witnesses claim, beings that live just beyond the edge of our understanding, watching from the tree line, stepping into view only long enough to remind us they're still there. One thing is certain: the forests are vast, the shadows are deep, and some roads, no matter how often we travel them, may still have something waiting at the edge, watching us pass.